6:59.
Let's go ahead and do it because we're live now. So welcome everybody to our live stream on YouTube the night before Thanksgiving. We are going to be talking about this common myth, this common idea out there that the Pilgrims were this prime example of the failures of socialism until they adopted capitalism, and all of a sudden overnight they succeeded. So is that true? Are we just a bunch of commies, going to debunk this? Hopefully we've been able to preserve our reputation where that's clearly not the case. But we also want to make sure that the facts, right? What is the truth behind the Pilgrims? What really led to their failures? What really led to their successes? And what are examples of other people? Is what the Pilgrims did, is it always bad? Is it always lead to failure economically, socially, politically? Or is there something more to it that we can learn and from mistakes and from successes? And so that's what we're really going to get into tonight. I appreciate everybody joining us on this night before Thanksgiving.
I want to butt in real quick and just say, hey, there's nothing wrong with you if you believe this or have believed this. I can tell you that I taught this to my kids. That they practiced communism when they came over, and look, here's an article from the experts showing that this is what took place, right?
Oh yeah.
And we read it together. We talked about it, and yay for capitalism, yay for America. That's why we've got to set it straight, right?
Yeah, and it's the liberty idea because we want to show how come communism, because real communism is a horrific, deadly, evil disease that should be opposed and stopped everywhere it raises its head. And so if we can do that, that's a great thing to do. But before we get into things, I just want to reach out to folks and let them know that, hey, we want to encourage you to give us, support our channel by giving us a super chat. We'll shout you out and read your super chat live during the program. Also, if you would like to become a member of our channel here, not just a subscriber, but an actual member, check that out. We've got tons of awesome perks for the members of our channel. It allows us to be able to grow, allows us to be able to do the things that we do, allow us to do more of these types of live programs and bring to you research and reports that you won't see anywhere else. So make sure that you support the channel, give us some love. We've also got merch available on the channel now, got some great worst global citizens. So we're going to tell the New World Order that we're not going to support their cause. Stickers, shirts, defending you, wrong slip of the tongue there. Holy cow. Tree of Liberty Society, t-shirts, and all the great swag there in our new YouTube store that we have. So I encourage you to make sure that you're subscribing and that you're supporting the channel. Make sure that we can continue to get the word out here at the Tree of Liberty Society. So one of the
old habits die hard.
I know.
That's why we've got to do these things, right?
So at the Tree of Liberty Society, as a member, we do live video trainings every week where members from around the world get together to get trained more on the principles of liberty, the threats to it, and what they can do about it. And we record those, and then we put them. And so our YouTube channel members get access to those videos as well. So if you want to be a part of the live trainings, become a member over at the treeoflibertysociety.com, treeoflibertysociety.com. Or if you just want to watch the recordings late afterwards, just become a member of this channel and you'll have full access to those. So we would love to see the love that you have for us. Also, we did some goals last time. I don't know if I'm going to do a goal again. That is a way to set right there on the channel. But if we get 3 super chats, 3 thank yous tonight, we will give you a sneak peek of some other projects we're working on, like the Dallin H. Oaks Intelligence Report. So if that's something you care about, you want to see, show us some love there. And we're going to do some other sneak peeks later on. But so just getting back to, okay, is it a myth? Is it true? Were the Pilgrims a bunch of raven communists that then were almost starving to death? And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's try capitalism. And all of a sudden they were prosperous and everything was wonderful again. So I want to show everyone some examples of where a lot of this comes from. Where does Rod a minute ago talked about the, sharing with his family articles about this. We have the Heritage Foundation They had articles about the Pilgrims beating communism with the free market. We have, just want to make sure. Okay, we have the Daily Economy. The Pilgrims tried socialism and it failed. We have The Stand. Pilgrims tried socialism. It did not work. You have the Cato Institute, how capitalism saved the Pilgrims. The New York Post, how socialism nearly killed the Pilgrims. So we just have tons and tons of different articles out there of experts, of people, of organizations that are seen by the masses of being liberty organizations that are promoting this idea that the Pilgrims were tried socialism and it basically almost killed them. And it's true. Socialism and communism does lead to mass death. And so that is absolutely true.
Well, first of all, where does the Heritage Foundation, where do they get off calling it communism here, what the Pilgrims did? Because communism is violent socialism, right? That's when you like rise up and murder everybody to get your way, right? So in no way did that happen. But the comments towards socialism are a little more
closer, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it was closer, obviously not communism, as you said, because socialism and communism have the same end goal. Communism just does it with the point of a gun, where socialism is slow, gradual, get you used to it.
The Pilgrims clearly did not do that. So,
and we're actually going to get into debunking like what that they clearly did not do that, and how we know they didn't do that. So, if you've got a question, or folks that are coming in here live, please leave a comment or a question in the chat. We'd love to communicate with you during the program. So, let's get into where are these people coming from? So who are these people? Who are these organizations? And it's important for us to understand that a lot of these folks are actually globalists. They're a part of the network, this roundtable groups, as Kara Quigley put it, of people promoting the New World Order. Either their chief, the people either as a corporate sponsor or people on their board of directors, the head of the organizations. The Council on Foreign Relations has strong ties to these organizations. And so why would the Council on Foreign Relations be, or their outlets be promoting the principles of liberty, right? Because we all know that the CFR, they are globalists. They are individuals. They are an organization that wants to build a global tyranny. So why would their outfits want to say that capitalism is what saved people? And so that's, I think, a question that we need to make sure that we are asking ourselves. Whenever we see a mainstream media outlet saying something that sounds like it actually makes sense, we have to kind of ask ourselves, why are they making sense?
Exactly.
So I want to get into that, which to be able to get into that, we need to give a little bit of background that, well, let me just skip through this stuff. So why are they promoting this anti-communist narrative? Well, the Foreign Affairs, which is the CFR official outlet, they've been publishing articles against socialism going back to their early days. We have the 1940s, 1960s. Just a few years ago, they have an article that is arguing that capitalism is enduring despite the revived threat of socialism. And so they are calling socialism a threat. They are calling communism a deathly and a deadly movement. In fact, in Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, in his book where he touts the New World Order, he says, in the Soviet Union especially, the high speed of industrialization in the period of 1926 and 1940 was achieved by a merciless oppression of the rural community in which millions of peasants lost their lives. The effort to copy this Soviet method in communist China in the 1950s brought that area to the verge of disaster. Holy cow, right? Why is Carol Quigley admitting that this bloody ideology is bloody and tyrannical when he says himself that the only thing he disagrees with the conspiracy about is that they wish to remain a secret. He likes what they're doing. And so why is he actually admitting that these guys are bloody? And so that's an important thing for us to ask ourselves as well. Just like we ask ourselves, why are the mainstream media, why are they making sense? We have to ask ourselves, why is why is Carroll Quigley making sense, and why is he admitting these things? So let's now get to the
raises my eyebrows. whenever there's something on the news, it's like Trump did this or somebody did that or Obama did this, and it's a great thing, and then you always wonder
what's really going on.
It's not what they're telling me, or or they're covering for something, right?
Exactly. So we go on to the next part of the article, of the book. Later on in the book, actually towards the end of the book, Carroll Quigley says that there does exist and has existed for a generation an internal Anglophile network which operates to some extent the way the radical right believes the Communist Act. So here he's admitting that this conspiracy that he loves operates in the same way that the communists operate. So he's got at least that admission. He's like, we work the same way that they do. Okay. And then he says, in fact, this network, which we may identify as the round table groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups and frequently does so. Okay, that's a pretty big admission right there. That they admit that they operate the same way as the communists and that they even work with the communists. But what we need to understand there is that they are not communists. The communists are tentacles. They are useful idiots for their cause. They are the machine, a part of the machine to implement the New World Order. They are not the end goal of the New World Order.
I think a good way to look at it too is if you think about those old, if you remember those Punch and Judy puppets.
Yeah.
Right? You got somebody in the back and they got the good guy puppet and they got the bad guy puppet. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the one hand is doing this over here and he's yakking and doing a naughty thing. And this guy comes and whacks him with a stick. It's really literally the same thing. They're controlling the one so that they can bring in their other. Well, we talked about it last night at the meeting we had about this being the Hegelian dialectic, right? The problem, reaction, solution.
Exactly. So what is the problem, reaction, solution? Let's get into that now. So they actually, the goal was never communism. They admit this themselves. They did not want to implement communism. Okay, so in this wonderful book, The Perestroika Deception, Anatoly Golitsyn, I always get this mixed up, but Anatoly Golitsyn, just for our viewers, who, Rod, was Anatoly Golitsyn? Rod?
Well, so one of the other series of books that he put out was called the Gulag Archipelago.
Yep.
Right? And that's a several volumes that were really thick, and they talk about his being a political prisoner of the Soviet Union. And so he defected, right?
Yep.
And then he came over and he wrote all these books to try and expose what the Soviets were actually doing. Because he was looking at the screen, he knew what was going on the world stage, but he knew also what they were actually doing from him being behind the scenes. So he wrote all these books to try and expose what was going on and let everybody know that you're all being deceived. This is what's actually going on.
Right. And so because of that inside knowledge that he had, he was able to know that this is the perestroika. For those of you, I was alive when the perestroika deception was going on, but I was not in any position to be aware of what was going on, my age. And so for most of our viewers may not know what perestroika was. So the Soviet Union during the 1980s was implemented perestroika, which was basically what they were saying was they were softening. They were not going to be as a tyrannical regime as they are known under Stalin, and that they were going to expand freedom. And so this was their program, and that of modernization and not being tyrannical that they were following right up until the Soviet Union, quote unquote, fell in the late 80s, early 90s. And so
Perestroika was Gorbachev, if anybody remembers.
Correct.
Gorbachev.
The guy with the ink on his forehead, right?
I was going to mention, the big red splotch on his forehead, right? He was bald except for that. And I remember, they set him up on the world stage as a hero that he was doing this perestroika in the Soviet Union. And I remember him appearing with Reagan And they just all the news shows and everything just really set him up as though he's this new savior. We've got to look to him as a hero. I was taught that in school. I remember them showing us videos and all kinds of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. I don't remember that, but looking back at yeah, that is exactly what happened. And so in Perestroika Deception, what Anatoly says is that it's a fraud. It's a show. That it was all designed to make the people believe that the Soviet Union was becoming more westernized, that they were becoming more, free and an open society. When in Perestroika Deception, he lays out what the actual plan was, that they designed it on purpose to make it and so that the Soviet Union and Russia could actually merge together in more comfortably.
Well, into Soviet Union and America.
What did I say?
Russia.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes, yeah, Soviet Union and the United States
and America
were to merge comfortably together. And that wasn't a new plan in the 1980s. When he came out with the book, and it was called Perestroika, that was new. Okay, this is our program. But that program actually goes back to the 1950s. And well, at the latest, where we have, in fact, before Congress and the Dodd hearings, you have the head of the Ford Foundation testifying that this is their program all the way back then. He says, Mr. Dodd, all of us who have a hand in the making of policies here at the Ford Foundation and the other Rockefeller foundations and whatnot have had experience operating under directives, the substance of which is that we use our grant-making power so as to alter life in the United States, that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Okay, so that is their goal. That is the goal. It is not.
We should also interject here. What was her name? The lady. She did a lot of interviews. That she was in the when Reagan pretended like he was going to close the Department of Education. He put this lady in the office, and then she went through their papers. I don't know why I can't think of her name. She's the one who wrote The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America.
Yeah.
And that book is based on her research. And that was exactly what she found going through the minutes of the meetings and the paperwork, looking at exactly what they were doing in the Department of Education. That was exactly what they said outright in their meetings was the goal of the Department of Education at that time was to make sure that the American education system was merging in the education system that was already being used in the Soviet Union at that time.
Right. Yeah. So we can see that being documented all over the place, that their goal is not just to implement Stalinistic communism. Well, all communism is Stalinistic. That's where it goes to. So I'm not trying to differentiate, like the communists did during the 1950s where like, well, no, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I'm not a Stalinist. As if there was
I'm a Trotskyite.
I'm a
Charlotte Iserbyt. That's who I was talking about. Charlotte Iserbyt.
Yep. But basically what they, the idea is that they are not trying to build a outright communistic state as we think of when we think of Stalin. And so so what is their goal? Why tyranny is their goal. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that these guys, that the New World Order is just some awesome thing that isn't it so great that they're not trying to be communists, that they're fighting the communists and that they're anti-communist. No, because they said themselves that they work with the communists to get to their goal. Communism is one of the stepping stones towards this totalitarian New World Order that they want to put into play. But we need to understand the nuances, and so that we don't get sucked into traps as what is going on with this idea that they're trying to promote. These council and foreign relations outlets are trying to sell us on an idea. And why is it that they're trying to sell us on this idea? That's what we need to understand so that we don't fall for the lies. That's the point. And so the next step. So if communism wasn't their goal, because they know that communism doesn't work. And so today, right, even though they're the Chi-Coms, it's Chinese, it's the communist Chinese, it is not in the strictest sense, China is not communist. And the economies that are similar to China that we have right now is China, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia. They're the closest to the same economies, where they are managed economies with semi-private profits. And that's what they're trying to that's what America, that we're seeing even more in the United States now, is this type of economy where they are trying to move this, because if they are moving towards privatizing of profits, but not really. And then we're moving more and more towards state control of the economy, but not total state control of the economy. They want to bring us to a point where we see in China, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates, where you're able to get rich to some extent. If you play the game, if you go through their tyrannical hoops, you can get, it is possible to get rich. And so it's not like communism, where the only people that get rich are the people that are in the upper echelons of government. Private citizens in these economies can get rich. And they recognize that if they want to avoid the opposition that they got, at Tiananmen Square, if they want to avoid the opposition that they got in the Soviet Union, that they have to have people that are fat, dumb, and happy, basically. We have to be in a position where we've got food in the fridge, we can go boating, we can have our recreation, and, life isn't a dredge. Because if life is a dredge all of the time, and you have no hope of ever being able to provide any kind of living for your family, there's going to come to a point where you're like, I've got nothing to lose. If I oppose them, why not oppose them? And so they're building these
economies. Either that or just die, right?
Or just die, right, yeah. And so it reminds me of in The Matrix, right? Remember that scene in The Matrix where they talk about how the Matrix, they tried to make it a utopia where you didn't have to work and life was just wonderful, and there was no struggles and everybody just had whatever they wanted, and it didn't work. But I think in reality, it's, we have the other idea of, they know it doesn't work, where if they put everybody under the boot of government, where there's no way to progress. And so if they want to have their tyranny implemented without opposition, they have to make us at least have an ability to be able to have our base, right? Our natural man desires fulfilled, where we want to be able to get rich. We want to be able to have the toys and the fun things of life. And if we can have the toys and fun things of life, we are not going to oppose tyranny, because if we oppose tyranny, then there's a chance that those fun things are going to be taken away from us. And if we don't realize that, if we think it's all about just a dystopian Hunger Games style tyranny, then we're going to get sucked into the nonsense that the conspiracy is giving us, and we're not going to even realize that we're being sucked into this global tyranny.
Exactly. Yeah, you made me think about the bread and circuses, right?
Oh, exactly.
We all know about that from 2,000 years ago, and it didn't work then. I mean, it worked for a while, right, and they realized, but I think that with all the think tanks and everything that they've got going on today, they've found a way to make it a little more sustainable, and people are fine, like you said, fat, dumb, and happy. Keep giving me bread, keep giving me circuses to watch, and I got Netflix. When I come home at night, I can binge garbage, and then I'll be happy in the morning when I go back to the grind.
Yep. There's a large enough portion of the population that can afford. It's not just the elites. They can afford their $100,000
yep.
Super Bowl tickets. They can afford, yep. Their sports cars or their Teslas. They can afford to just go into a regular sports game and whatnot. So they're.
Yeah, even people on welfare. I remember my grandma telling me, my grandpa worked his butt off and made meager wages, but they had a lady across the street, next door neighbor, who bragged to her one time about that. She said, "You guys just work your tail off and you got nothing, and I'm on welfare. Look, we got 2 cars and a boat, and we got this house, from welfare."
Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's go in and further explain what the conspiracy's angle is with telling us that the Pilgrims were communists and that capitalism saved them. So they're lying. The Pilgrims were not communists, because real communism and socialism is first and foremost, above anything else, economically speaking, It is anti-God. That's just, and the Pilgrims were the furthest thing from anti-God. The second thing is there's no leaving. In communism, what do they have, right? You have the Berlin Wall. You cannot leave real socialism and communism. And it's the ruling elite versus everyone else. This is, beyond the economics, beyond the minutia, day-to-day minutia. It's these three things that makes up what real communism and socialism is. Which
100%, especially that first one there, the anti-God, because under socialism, the state is God. And that's why they hate religion so much, because it opposes the state as the ultimate authority.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, and that's what and that's what we see today, and that's why they get churches. And as I laid out, as well as we in the book we just published, the Righteous Sword of Tyranny, the author of that book pointed out that they use religion to get the people to back tyranny, and so that's why we're sold on the lie that Romans 13 says that we're supposed to just obey government no matter what, because they want to make an idol after government. And that is who we are supposed to obey. And if we disobey government, then we're disobeying God. And so that's what we see in a tyranny, is this idea of whether knowingly or unknowingly replacing God with government. So,
absolutely, yeah, that's so true. So true. So many good examples of that. If you just look around at the things going on in the world, you can see how that's playing out.
Exactly. So, speaking of which, just take a a short break to promote the book. We have it on our website right now. The Righteous Sword Against Tyranny is the book that breaks down. It argues that government exists by covenant with the people and God, and that when rulers break that trust and destroy liberty, obedience to God may require resistance to men. And the author's reasoning is drawn from the scriptures, natural law, and the moral duties of conscience, and later echoed in the thoughts of the American founders. And so if we want to be like the American founders, we have to understand the things that they understood and read the types of books that they read. And so this is one of those books, and it's in our new Liberty class.
Book so much.
Oh, it's paradigm changing. It just is.
It's not long. That's one of those things I think a lot of people are turned off about when they consider older books. A lot of them are lengthy. This one is a very short book. It's a quick read. You kind of got to slow down a little bit because of the older language, but it's beautiful language. It is extremely clever. It's fun to read, and he makes amazing points, like you just said. Just talking about, look, if we've got leaders, there's a reason to have leaders. They're supposed to be doing something specific, and when they're not, you've got to recognize that you've got a duty to do something about that.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, and so because of that, we included in this edition of the book a modern translation, and so that way we don't want to have any kind of barrier to entry where we're like, oh, it's old English, I don't want to read it. No, there's a modern translation of it, and so it'll be an easy read, a quick read, and a paradigm shifting read. So, and it's available on our website, paperback, ebook, or audiobook. So you're like, oh, I want an audiobook. Well, lucky for you, there is no reason why you cannot pick up this copy, this book, because whatever way you like to consume books, it is available to you. So I encourage you to pick that up at our website in whatever form that you like. But just going on. So what was the real cause of the Pilgrims' failures? If it wasn't communism, because they weren't communists, what was it? And people don't realize that it was actually indentured servitude. That's what it was. They weren't just a bunch of folks that just got together and decided to live communally and share in, each other's fruits of all of their labors. No, that's not what happened, actually. And I don't know, maybe other people went to government schools or their private school or their religious school, taught them what was really going on. But I never even heard about this organization that was behind the Pilgrims until I started digging into, because I kept being told that the Pilgrims tried, they were a good, righteous people, and they tried communism or they tried socialism, and it doesn't work. It led to their starvation. And I'm like, well, no, first of all, they weren't communists. Second of all, them working together for each other's mutual benefit is not what caused them to starve to death. It was indentured servitude.
Let's talk about what that is real quick then, because I don't think a lot of people even realize what indentured servitude is. It's basically you contract yourself as a slave for some purpose. Like a lot of times people were like, I want to get out of England, I want to go to America. I'm going to agree to work for you for 6 or 7 years as your servant to pay off that debt that I'm incurring by you doing this for me.
Right. Yes, thank you. Yes. So that is what is, it is different. It's almost, people could say, well, you agree to go to work for somebody for a certain amount of pay. Well, that sounds like being an employee.
Exactly.
So what does that mean? So who are they indentured servants to? So we have the Company of Merchant Adventurers of London was the group. They're basically the Goldman Sachs, right? They're a bunch of venture capitalists that funded people to go to America and to build a community or to build an infrastructure. Really, what it was all about, to build infrastructure, so that then they could have a place where they could have a formed society that they could then sell homes to and then make money off of later on. And so what they required of the Pilgrims, so of course it cost money to cross the ocean. And the Pilgrims, most of them were very poor individuals because they were religiously persecuted, and they had to, they suffered the ability to be able to provide for their families, and it was very difficult, and so it made them very poor. And so they had to reach out to people like the Merchant Adventurers of London to fund their trips to come to America, to escape the persecution, to be amongst a people of like mind. And so, but to do that, they had to give up some of their liberty. They had to become basically voluntary slaves for a bit of time. And so what was required of them, right, they had to put these requirements over them for repayment. All land that they acquired in America for the first 7 years, all labor that they performed, and the products that they produced all belonged to the joint stock company. So all of these things that the Pilgrims produced and acquired and built for the first 7 years did not belong to the Pilgrims. They belonged to the Merchant Adventurers of London. Now that right there, I never knew that before. And so, of course, how can you work for someone else when everything that you're producing, what motive is there for you? You're like, everything I'm doing besides to just keep me alive is going towards this venture capitalist. That's not much of an incentive.
Besides keeping you alive, it's like being a prisoner, right? You get 3 meals a day, and that's about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what else you do. You're not going to get anything out of it.
Exactly. And then they received equal shares regardless of work. So this is where I think the myth of communism came into it, where, supposedly the Pilgrims were a bunch of commies because they received the same amount of benefit whether they worked or they didn't. And so that definitely was a major part of the failure of them, but it was magnified by the fact that everything that they went to, this was just equal shares, meaning here is your ability to survive. Well, then why am if I'm going to get, my neighbor's going to work and provide me food, I'm not going to work. And so it obviously fell apart because of that part of it.
Defaults to the lowest common denominator, right?
Exactly.
No one wants to work any harder than the one that's working the least.
Yep. And then there was no private gardens, private trading, and private property were forbidden. So it was really basically what we have today with the naked capitalist, as Cleon Skousen put it, where you have these controlled economies with, like I mentioned earlier, communist China, Russia, the UAE, and as they're working to build in the United States, where they're controlling it was a heavily it wasn't themselves agreeing to these rules. They're not like they didn't get together. The Mayflower Compact wasn't, it wasn't like they just got together and they said, hey, let's all agree to not allow each other to have gardens for our own benefit.
Right.
That's ridiculous, right? They had an outside force that mandated these things to them, preventing them from even providing for themselves, because everything belonged to this corporation. And basically your Rockefellers, your naked capitalists, where they're using government to be able to acquire power for themselves and make it so monopolizing everything so that nobody else can be able to get ahead. Okay, so what are some other things that they, were causing them problems besides these types of things, right? The Pilgrims were then expected to work for the benefit of the investors and not themselves. There is no motive for you. This isn't about profit motive versus collective motive. This is one single motive. I am providing everything for my life to someone else, not myself, not the community. It wasn't even like, oh, it's not for myself, it's for my neighbor. No, it's for somebody in a different continent. Everything I'm doing is for somebody that I don't even know's benefit.
I'm disturbed by how closely that resembles every place I've ever worked.
Again, almost like being an employee, right?
Yeah, you have no incentive as an employee to do things that are going to like benefit the company. In fact, I have a friend who used to work for Netflix, and there were some people tasked to do something, and they were taking a long time. So one day on his break, like his hour lunch break, he threw a program together that did the thing. It saved them, hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And he got in trouble for taking incentive to do the thing, so why would anybody step up and say, hey, I see all these things we can fix? It's not going to benefit you, and you're going to get the same wages that you're going to get if you sit and do the minimum at your desk,
Yeah, like even if you got like a portion, you're like, okay, let's give a percentage of what you saved the company. Even if it wasn't everything, there'd be an incentive to make things better.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. In fact, like I said, he got in trouble and they made him undo what he had done. It's just awful.
Don't save us money.
Right. Don't fix problems, please. It's not your job. Stay in your corner.
So that's what was going on with the Pilgrims. So, but there were other problems. So, before I get to that, I want to talk about what did William Bradford say? What led to the success? As all these articles that I mentioned before, they all say it was capitalism that led to their success. What did William Bradford say? He said, at length, after much debate of things, the governor, with the advice of the chiefest among them, gave way that they should set corn, every man for his own particular, and in that regard trust to themselves, in all other things to go on in the general way as before, and so assign to every family a parcel of land according to the proportion of their number, for that end only for present use, but made no division for inheritance, because he couldn't have given it to them, because everything belonged to this venture capitalist organization. And so he just gave it, everybody was given a home to live in and take care of while they were there, but it was not theirs, and ranged all boys and youth under some family. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could use, and saved him a great deal of trouble, and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field, and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. Okay? So this is what they said actually caused the people to start working to a point where they could actually produce things, because they stopped there was a portion of people that didn't work, before because they got the same outcome no matter what, which is where the myth of communism comes in. And then they made it to, and then he changed things where he made it so that there was actually an incentive for people to go out and work themselves. But it was not free market capitalism.
That's what I was going to say. The thing they didn't do was set up shops and sell corn to their neighbors and everything else, right? They basically undid the one thing that you pointed out of the bullet points there. They undid that part that said that they couldn't have their private gardens and whatever. Like, okay, now you can do that. They were still working and stuff, right? And the majority of it was going to predominantly to the company of the merchants, but they could also do some things for themselves. So that self-reliance was what actually turned things around. They didn't have to sit around worrying about whether or not their neighbors were going to do anything, so that they would all have enough food on their plate, right? You can do something for yourself now. That's not capitalism. That's self-reliance. That's a different thing altogether.
But it also debunks the myth of that we did learn in school, that it was the so-called savages that came in and showed the white man how to garden.
Yeah, that's true too. That's a good point. Yeah.
And so,
yeah, the white people were stupid. They'd never grown anything before. Where did food come from? And magically, I don't know.
It's always these false dichotomies. It was either free market capitalism, or it was either capitalism under the naked capitalists, or it was the savage that taught the white guy how to do things. It wasn't rugged individualism, people working together, that kind of a thing that that actually led to success. But as we see in the actual record, it was people giving an incentive, the ability to have personal liberty, and then they were able to work together. But that leads us to what was the problem? What were some other issues that led to people? It wasn't just because it wasn't like the Pilgrims were lazy. Can you imagine these guys are like basically Puritans, and one of the deadly sins is what? Slothfulness.
Idleness.
Yeah, idleness, right? These guys, as a general rule, especially the main idea of what we think of when we think Pilgrim, these guys were Puritans, and they were not idle. Idleness because I'm going to get a free lunch it wouldn't even cross their mind. They're like, I'm going to go to hell if I do that. I'd rather die.
You'd rather be hanged.
Yeah. And
exactly.
So how did you have these people with that attitude do that? Well, because they didn't have it wasn't what we were sold. It's just we were being told a lie of what actually went down. Okay. So the issues that were faced by the Pilgrims were this: they were not unified in faith. You have a small community that they had people of different faiths. You had the Separatists, the Puritans, and then you had a group of other people that were more idly minded. How do you have a group of people that are that are Puritans with a bunch of idle people? It's not going to work. Then you have the culture. They had a different culture. They had different customs. They had different family structures. And then you had the social expectations, where Separatists, the Puritans, worked for a mutual benefit, for each other's benefit, while you had others that were not a part of this faith, that they just worked for what can I get for me? That more selfish motive of, if I can't get anything out of it that's different, if I get the same thing no matter what, then why am I going to get off my rear end? I'll be as slothful as I can and still get as much as I can from being slothful, and I'm only going to work to be able to not die. Right? So you have, this is really what's going on. This is really even more fundamental, because if you had everybody in there, if everybody that was in the Plymouth colony that were all just the Separatists, they were all a part of the same congregation with the same culture, with the same social expectations, I don't think they would have had the problems that they had. Even as big of a problem that they had to provide for the corporation. Because if they had that social cohesion, they could have worked through a lot of those problems. But as we see from famous natural law philosophers that observe natural tendencies of man, that the problems that they had by intermingling their culture is what the real problem was. Samuel Pufendorf highly quoted, often quoted by the founding fathers. He said, among those which join together to form a government in a country, it is absolutely requisite that there be a perfect consent and agreement concerning the use of the means of government. If they do not agree with themselves but are divided and separated in their opinions, they will be divided into parties and will clash. And then in the 1800s, you have Orson Spencer saying, men of congenial interest should separate themselves from those of adverse interests and pair off each to each their promiscuous intermixture of heterogeneous bodies for the purpose of unity and strength is alike distant both from pure religion and sound philosophy. So, in my opinion, that is what we just read there is the real cause of the Pilgrims' problems. Is that
lack of unity and oneness there?
Yep, exactly. You have people of different cultures coming together. The balkanization of society is really where you start to see the breakdown of society. And so, along with morality is of course a vital linchpin there as well. But if you are all of the same like mind, you can work through the problems that they were facing with the corporation that was demanding their property and demanding all of the fruits of their labor for the first 7 years. They could have worked together to solve that problem because they had the same religious leader that could have brought everybody together and say, hey, guys, this stinks and we're in this bad situation. Let's just work through this and recognize what the consequences are if we don't. But because they didn't have that, they couldn't work through those problems. You had the people that, you had the separatists and you had the non-separatists, the basically Anglicans, and the Anglicans aren't going to listen to the separatist leader and say, let's work together. They were just going to clash, just as Samuel Pufendorf said, is the natural, that's, you throw a ball up in the air, and what happened with the Pilgrims is what is going to happen no matter what. Even if they had the most optimal situation, it was when they put people together, right, instead of forcing everybody to live together, now all of a sudden you have households in a home. Now you have that societal, at least within the home boundaries, this cohesion that they were able to have. And now they had that cohesion and the ability to provide for themselves and come together in that aspect. Then they prospered. And so we see that the balkanization is what led to the problem, and then the unification of the culture that led to the solving of the problem. That's really where it comes down to.
Yeah, that family example you gave, I think, is pretty powerful too. Because if you've got some kids that are, let's say the parents are unified, but then you've got some kids that want to listen, some kids that don't, some want to rebel, some want to do the opposite of what the parents want, then you're going to get nowhere and you're going to have the same kinds of results like you're talking about there. There's no way that family is going to get anything done as a unit. There's just no cohesion, no unity, and they're working against one another's goals. So it just doesn't work. Yeah. I also wanted to point out too, I think a really good point. We mentioned The Righteous Sword Against Tyranny, the book, earlier. And I think that something that's extremely important in this is the fact that if we are not educated and like actively educating ourselves and our families, then we are leaving ourselves wide open to these kinds of deceptions. Because this is something that if we had done some research on our own years ago, then let's say me personally, then when I came across the article that I ended up sharing with my family years ago, I never would have fallen for it because I would have known better. Right. And clearly the best place to go is not so-called experts who are going to interpret this information for you. The best place to go is straight to the source. So you quoted Bradford, right?
Yep.
Who else would know? He was the one that was in charge, right? Yeah. And he kept all these records. We go back and read from him and see exactly what took place from his own mouth. There's no interpretation needed. You can just read his words and it makes sense. You know what he's talking about. Then you're not being deceived by somebody later in modern times trying to reinterpret history according to our own modern morals and whatever, right? we go back and we read it for ourselves. So that's why I think books like that, The Righteous Sword of Tyranny, are extremely important, because then you're going back straight to the horse's mouth. You get that information. You see from somebody else who was living through a similar situation to what we're living through now,
Yep.
and you learn from it. You don't have to worry about whether or not Glenn Beck or Rosie O'Donnell are going to tell you, right? They're never going to tell you. None of those people are, because, like you pointed out, they all belong to these Anglophile networks, like Carol Quigley said,
Mm-hmm.
and they clearly have no intention of making sure you know what's actually going on. They want you to buy into the garbage,
Yep.
so that you can be led along by your nose. So it's up to us. Yeah, I think you'd mentioned before, in giving this lesson another time, the quote from Hosea in the Old Testament where he says, "My people are destroyed
Yep.
for lack of knowledge." And if that happens, it's our own fault,
Yep.
because we didn't educate ourselves. We can't sit around waiting for the experts to tell us what to do. And even, let's say you still believe in some of those experts, fine. A good quote that we've all heard is, "Trust but verify."
Yeah.
If you believe it, then do your own research and find out, because then you're going to know whether or not in the future you can trust what they say. If you find out that you can back it up from the source documents, they're reliable. But if you can't, then you know that you've got to take what they say with a grain of salt, or
Right.
stop taking what they say at all, which is what I did.
Right.
I don't listen to any of those people anymore, because most of them are, like you said, uh, closet, they're puppet globalists. So
Exactly. Dr. Wolverton has a saying that I like a lot, is don't drink downstream. And so we mentioned, we quoted from uh, William Bradford, but another great series that going through and just reading themselves is this book, The Works of John Robinson. It's a 3-volume set. It's on sale. I bought the whole set for $30, so $10 a book. And John Robinson, he wasn't on the Mayflower, but he was their religious leader back in Holland, and so he's another witness from across the ocean of what was going on and what the problems actually were. And so he says the exact same thing as William Bradford, who was there, said as well. And so just going back and just going to the sources of people that were actually there, what did they say? Not what, what can we take one little line from, and say and extrapolate. And because what they're trying to say is not right. The conspiracy is not trying to actually promote free market capital, freedom. They're not trying to promote freedom, I should say. What they're trying to promote is a society that will require the chains that they need to have total control. And so they're going to say that it wasn't a lack of unity that caused their problems. It was an economic system that caused their problems. And no matter what your culture is, no matter what your beliefs are, if you guys just follow economics, then you're going to be able to have, prosperity. And so it's
I think too.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
And so they want us to think that we just have to follow their program, just follow their agenda, and we'll be fine. Whereas what it will do is, what they're trying to do is they are trying to balkanize. They are trying to make a giant melting pot of society, because they know that causes contention, that causes strife. And so that strife they will then use to increase their control. And so that so they use that control then to push everybody into the digital dollar, push everybody into digital ID. And then they will say that anything outside of this is basically like a Jim Jones, where you're going to be a part of a cult if you want to have a social cohesion. If you want to have a cultural cohesion, you're a racist, a bigot, or a cult member. And that's what they're really trying to do, and so that they can force you into the cult of the New World Order.
Yeah, they use all the insults and everything to put you down and try and turn people against you, without to keep them from looking into your ideas, right? They make you look bad. I wanted to point out too that we are major victims of propaganda.
Oh yeah.
Propaganda just over 100 years ago, that was rolled out. Edward Bernays wrote the book, and even he was talking about in his day that there were people already who were controlling society by controlling our desires and things of the masses, right?
Right.
So it's something that we've got to watch out for as well. We've got to keep our attitudes in check. Um, we we leave ourselves open, like with our pride, we leave ourselves open to deception. So we hear the nonsense about, I mean, clearly we live in a capitalist society, right? It's controlled capitalism, but that's what it is.
Right.
But when we hear the nonsense, that's like, yay, capitalism, then we just get all puffed up in our pride, right? Because it makes us feel good. We get this false sense of patriotism. We're doing the right thing. We have no need to repent, right? And it's that pride we put ourselves up that really just sets us up to be knocked down. And so I just wanted to point that out as well. It's just something that we've got to keep in check so that we are not liable to fall for the nonsense, that the propaganda that we get fed. Again, put that together with the research. Some humility and some research will do you a lot of good.
Because we have this false dichotomy, right, where we're either told that it's not about it's not really about liberty versus freedom. They tell you because you're rich, you're free. America has, who's heard this a million times from all of the so-called conservative talk show hosts? You know, we have more billionaires and millionaires than any other country in the world because we are so free. And so now we're lying to ourselves thinking that we are a free country when we're not. And so and that's brings me back to the point that I made earlier, is that the conspiracy's goal is not communism. It is to bring us into this economic, totalitarian new world order where you're able to have rich people, you're able to become a millionaire, you're able to become a billionaire when you stick within the system. When you have
if you're part of their club.
If you're part of their club, if you have your social credit score is high enough, right? You're not resisting the tyranny, then you can be rich. And so that keeps you in line. That keeps you the slave, because you're like, well, if I stand up against this, I'm not going to be able to be rich. I'm not going to, not even be rich. I'm not going to be able to have my job. I'm not going to be able to travel. I'm not going to be able to have the fun toys that I have. I'm not going to be able to go boating or on vacations to Disney World or, whatever it is. And so that's really what it's all about, is about creating is equating wealth with liberty. And so that way you're rich, you're free. And so you don't even think anymore about anything.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. That reminded me, there was a show there's a popular show called Black Mirror. Have you heard of that show before?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the stuff is like dystopian stuff. And there's one episode, I don't remember the name of it right now, but it starred Ron Howard's daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, I think is her name.
She's the one in Jurassic World and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, she was also in The Village, which a movie that I love.
Oh yeah, The Village,
yeah. So in this one episode that she was in, that was all about the social credit score. Mm-hmm. She went and she bought some food from a food truck, and then like she rated them, and then as she walked away, they rated her, and the guy didn't like something she'd said, so it made her social credit score go down, and it went so low that if it got below a certain point, just being around somebody else, you would make their score go down just by your presence. And so it just spiraled. Like she couldn't go to her job because she would be around people and dock their score. She couldn't go to parties and all that, nobody wanted her around anymore. And it reminded me, I learned a while back about some people in China that live out in the mountains, living in caves and building houses out of sticks and stuff. And one of the guys they'd talked to, he'd had a house and a good job and cars and all this stuff, but then they discovered that he'd had an extra kid more than the government allows. Mm-hmm. This is a true story. Then they just threw all of his belongings out, evicted him, and threw him out in the street. Then he lost his job and everything. And exactly like you said, that illustrated right out of the Chinese communist system there. That's exactly what they're doing. But if you toe the line, when I was living in Idaho, we were on the path up to Yellowstone, and there's busloads of Chinese that get sent here from communist China every day up and down that highway that I lived off of there to go vacationing all over the U.S.
Yep.
Those are the perks, because you're towing the line, you get the perks.
Yep. You're a good
I don't want to live in a world
citizen,
like that.
Right?
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, a good global citizen, exactly. Yeah.
So that's why we need to be the worst global citizen, which brings us back to the merch that's in our store right here on our YouTube channel. Make sure you tell folks that you're the worst global citizen. It's about freedom, and so I think that breaks it down. I've had a good time. I think we've kind of addressed the issue, but what we need to really understand is that the conspiracy has told us a lie, and the conspiracy is lying to us about all kinds of different things, and they want us to not be socially cohesive. They don't want us to be culturally cohesive. They want us to be submissive, and so that's they're trying to equate richness with liberty, and so they ignored what was the real cause of the Pilgrims' starvation, which was tyranny. And tyranny can come not just from government, but the tyranny of this private company, and what got them their freedom. Well, it was tyranny from the private company and multiculturalism. And what got them their prosperity was social cohesion. Social cohesion and liberty. That's what got them their ability to be prosperous again and not to starve to death. It wasn't the savages telling them how to plant things, and it wasn't this unified economic system. It was cultural unity and it was liberty that led to the Pilgrims' prosperity. So.
Yeah,
hopefully
I think a part of that.
Yeah,
I think a part of it as well is part of that. Part of that cultural cohesion is the ability to be an individual and willingly participate. You use your individualism to contribute to the greater good, right? To that
Yep.
whole. That was one of the lessons that a lot of people don't realize, that the Little House on the Prairie books were actually written by Laura Ingalls' daughter, Rose Wilder, and they are mostly uh, biographical. Some of I think a little bit of it was kind of contrived, but most of it was based on interviews with her mother. But you can find interviews with Rose Wilder where she discusses that her whole purpose in putting those books together was to promote individualism, a spirit of individualism among the youth, because she saw that people were losing that as they were moving into the cities, becoming more industrialized. They were losing that. And you can see, you mentioned earlier the Ford Foundation and these other groups that are part of the conspiracy, for lack of a better word, right? And those people are the ones that are funding the PBS programs, all of which teach anti-individualism. You'll notice that every single show, Backyardigans and all these things, it's always a group. No one can ever figure anything out on their own. They can never do anything on their own. It's always as part of this group think. They can't figure it out. They've got to do the stuff. And it leads into the controlled mindset like we talked about earlier, right? Also, before we go, I wanted to mention real quick that we know capitalism is not the way, especially controlled capitalism. We know socialism, controlled socialism, is not the way to go. Um, and so the question is out there, like, what is the right way, right? And so I'm not going to read these, but I wanted, because we're going to have this up on the website for people to replay, I'm going to give a couple of scriptures real quick for people to look up. Is that all right if I do
Yeah,
that?
please. Yeah.
So I was looking at it and thinking, pondering before we did this live stream tonight, about, like, I know that there is a right way. The Lord always has a way that He wants us to do things. So I thought about a couple of scriptures that kind of give us an idea
Mm-hmm.
about what it is that the Lord wants. So, number one, John chapter 17, verse 21. And then if we go over to Acts chapter 4, verse 32, and then Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. That one right there talks about Ananias and Sapphira. And then for those who are Latter-day Saints, look at Moses chapter 7, verse 18, talking about Enoch and the city of Enoch. And in the Doctrine and Covenants, we've got section 88, verse 123, and then section 104, verse 16. That's just a handful of things to look at there, but they're all they all tell you exactly what it is that the Lord wants of us. That's going to help us to figure out, like, what it is we need. We know that the system we have right now is not sustainable. It's not what we should be doing, and this will kind of help us to see what it is that we should be doing so that we can start kind of moving in the right direction. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate being a part of this discussion. It's nice to see, like, when you have the truth, shining that light on it actually makes things make more sense. It gives us that proper perspective, right?
Yeah.
And helps us to recognize the propaganda, like we were talking about earlier, and then start to unravel the propaganda we've absorbed, so that we can start to lean more into what it is that we should be doing. So I
Exactly.
appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thank you. I'm glad we got on tonight, and we will be seeing everyone more regularly as we do these live streams. We got things set up, and as you can tell, it's this tonight's live stream has been less buggy than we've had in the past, and so I think we've got all the bugs that we've worked out, and so future live streams will be clean. And so I just encourage you again, go to the treeoflibertysociety.com, pick up your copy of The Righteous Sword Against Tyranny. Become a supporter of our YouTube channel, and make sure that we can continue to have these types of discussions to overcome these myths, these sacred cows that we have in our day, and to be able to understand what the real path to liberty is. So we will see you all again next time.